Hey gardeners, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to be joined by Banba, my veiled chameleon, who's a little bit sheddy on his mouth, and Chacho, my dog, who's kind of just roaming around and basking in the sunlight today. So somebody recently asked me some tips and tricks on how to set up a reptile room, and at first I wasn't really sure. I was kind of like, I don't know, you just put reptiles in a room and call it a day. But as I was thinking about it, I realized that there actually are quite a bit of things that I learned while setting up this reptile room that I think would be helpful for others. So I wrote everything down and I'm going to make it an entire video. So a lot of you guys probably already have your own reptile room, so maybe you can learn something new in this video. And for those of you that want a reptile room someday, I hope that this video helps when you actually start getting it put together. Banba's sporting a different outfit on each side today. I love when he does that, it's so cool. So the very first thing when creating a reptile room is to decide what room you want to put it in, because when I started getting all of my animals, I lived in an apartment and all of the animals were just in my own bedroom. So I wanted to move out and get more space for my animals. So the very first thing that I was looking for was an extra room that I could have just for all of my animals that I would call the reptile room. So when I was looking for apartments, I found this place and I fell in love with this room because I think it's basically like a side sunroom. It's attached to my bedroom. So the only way to get to the reptile room is through my bedroom. And it could be a big closet for someone too, but I don't really care about closets and I care more about my reptiles. So now it became a reptile room. Something that I fell in love with for this reptile room were the windows. Windows go along the whole side of the wall, which just brings in so much light, and I thought it would be so perfect for my animals because it's so important for your animals to get a day and night cycle. So they do need that natural light to understand when it's daytime and when it's nighttime, so that way they can go about their natural day activities. Whether they're nocturnal or they're diurnal, whatever the case is, they definitely need that day-night cycle. It's easiest to imitate with the actual sun outside. So that brings me to my very first point, which is windows. So windows are very important for a reptile room because you need that day-night cycle for your animals to go about their daily activities and just be healthier overall. Another great thing is that it can give your animals something to look at. I know that that was one of the main things I wanted for my veiled chameleon Banba here, because he actually loves windows. He will just sit and look out the window all day long, so it's very important for him. And I didn't want him to be basically just in a little dark room where he doesn't have things to look at all day. That being said, you also want to be careful with windows, especially if you have an albino animal. Like for instance, if you have an albino leopard gecko, you absolutely do not want to put it by the window because they have very sensitive eyes and you don't want them to be harmed whatsoever. My tiger salamander, they also don't like bright lights, so I keep my salamander completely out of the reptile room because sunlight is not something that's good for them. They like cold, dark places. So obviously a window would not be something that's great for that type of an animal. So it's just important to make sure that the animals that you are going to be putting near windows are okay with it and they aren't going to be injured or harmed or have any stress due to those windows. Next thing that I want to talk about is ways to save space. So something that I learned before I moved here was that it is great to actually just go to Home Depot and get shelving units for garages to put all of your enclosures on. By being able to stack your enclosures at a higher up level, you'll be able to save way more space and put more animals in your room. I'm not saying to do this just so that you guys can go out and buy a ton of animals, but I do know that some of you guys have a hard time with space. So I highly recommend getting a shelving unit if that's something that you think would help you and give you more space within your reptile room. I actually use one in my bedroom and I use one in the reptile room as well, and it just really makes everything look nicer and you're able to keep way more space in the reptile room. So I absolutely love the shelving units, and they can actually hold up to 800 pounds each level. So make sure that you're getting a heavy duty one, especially if you have very heavy enclosures that you're putting on top of them. So the next thing that I want to talk about are outlets. So obviously these animals are still going to be requiring heating pads or lighting, UVB, whatever the case may be. So all of those things require plugs. Plugs are very important when it comes to reptile keeping. So what I actually do is I get extension cords and I use those, and I actually placed everything very strategically in my reptile room on my outlets, and I put all of the plugs in the same area that have the same exact time to be on during the day. So at nighttime it's so easy for me because I can just go to that extension cord and turn the off button on, and all of the lights will go off for the night, and that's all I need to do. You can also buy a timer and set everything. That's also going to make your life way easier. I just happen to always be home, so it's not necessary for me. But it's definitely nice to set it up that way on your outlet, so that way you don't have to individually go to every single enclosure and just hit the off button a million times. Just put it all on the same outlet, flip it off, and you're good to go and ready to go to bed. So the next thing that I want to talk about is humidity for the reptile room. So there are different ways to go about this. I wanted to overall increase the humidity in my reptile room, so I actually put all of my tropical high humidity requiring animals in the reptile room. That way if I need to add a humidifier, then it's not going to cause harm to any of my animals. That's why I took my bearded dragon and my corn snake and I put them in my bedroom, because that's a more dry place to be for them, especially if the humidity just spikes up in the reptile room, because I don't want them to get sick. So the reptile room is for the most part always going to be at a higher humidity than the rest of the house. Some ways that you can add humidity to your reptile room would be to add a lot of plants in the room will actually increase the humidity. Or you can add a humidifier, which will really help as well. So just those little things, those little details will really increase the humidity. Just be very careful that if you do have a desert or a very dry species animal in that reptile room, you should remove them if you're going to be increasing the overall humidity of the room, because you don't want them to get sick or have a bacterial infection, respiratory infection. Very important to make sure that their needs are always being met. That being said, maybe you have a lot of desert species and you want to decrease the humidity in your reptile room. If this is something that you're looking to do, I would highly suggest getting a fan for more air circulation within that reptile room for your animals. I also have windows, so when I feel the humidity is too much, I can open those windows and let some more ventilation and air come into the room. So the next thing that I want to talk about is temperature. So it is summer here and I do have the air conditioning on, which keeps everything very comfortable, but there is a lot of sun that comes into the reptile room. So the reptile room is always the warmest part of the house, which is totally fine for my animals because the temperatures are all adequate for them. If it does tend to warm up a little bit too much, I may crank the AC a little bit. My issue mainly comes in at winter time, because at winter time it really does get cold here, and I live in Chicago, so it's pretty cold here. But because of that, I need to make sure that my reptile room stays nice and warm for all of these animals. So on the days where it does hit like -12, it is freezing, and even the floor feels cold in the reptile room. So the only way that I'm able to control and make sure that it's warm enough in the reptile room during the winter time is by using a space heater. I highly recommend it. A lot of people may have this issue in their house where they find that they have like crested geckos and that the temperature is just too cold for them and they're thinking about adding a heat lamp for them. I would never recommend adding a heat lamp for a crested gecko. It's just very dangerous territory. I think that just increasing the ambient temperature with a space heater is much safer to go about, especially with those sensitive animals that have a room temperature requirement. Something else to keep in mind when you're setting up your reptile room is that a lot of the times you're going to be putting glass tanks in the room and you're going to be putting them side by side. So you need to be careful when doing this, because by putting your animals next to each other, you may actually be causing them a lot of stress and not be aware of it. Because if a crested gecko sees another crested gecko, or a gargoyle gecko sees a crested gecko next to it, they will get very stressed out. So this is something that you want to keep an eye on. And what I actually do is I used to put pieces of paper, I would just tape them along the sides of the tank. That way that glass part is not showing anymore and they aren't going to be able to see their neighbor lizard. So that way they aren't going to be stressed out. You can do the same thing for snakes. It's very important to know your animals and just keep an eye on them, because you don't want them to ever have a lot of stress, because it's just not good for their overall health. It may keep them from eating in the future too. So it's just something to keep an eye on, and make sure that your animals are just at a very low stress rate and don't have to see each other through the glass. Some people may think it's cute and they're like, oh, they're friends, but there's a really good chance that the animal is actually stressed out or wants to attack because they're being territorial over their enclosure. So it can be a very stressful situation, and it's better to just eliminate that issue right off the bat by just blacking out the sides of the enclosures. That way they can't see each other. The next tip that I have is to basically just learn your animals and learn what they're most comfortable with when you're trying to rearrange them in your room. So like I said, Banba loves the window. He stares out the window all day long. So I needed to make sure that he was going to be right next to the window. I actually used to have my leopard gecko in here on the floor, and he was right across from my boa constrictor. So he actually wasn't eating and he wasn't very active, and it seemed like something was a little bit off with him when I moved him in there. And it was actually because he was stressed out because of the boa constrictor next door, because he could literally see him all day through the tank. So that was something that I had to nip right in the bud right away and move him. He is now in my living room. He's not by any boa constrictors, and he's not stressed out, and he resumed his normal feeding schedule and is way more active again. So you just really got to keep an eye on your animals and be careful with the placement and where you're going to be putting them. You don't want to put anyone near a potential predator that's going to stress them out. And those are pretty much the basics other than just decorating the room. I absolutely love collecting things. I love collecting butterflies and moths and art from my friends. So I keep all of those things around my reptile room just to bring it more to life. I also love plants as well. My plants thrive in this room because of the light, so it's just really, really great. So obviously, if you want to add plants to a reptile room, make it your own little jungle sanctuary, go for it. It's going to be so cool. If you guys ever set up your reptile room, I love seeing pictures, so please go ahead and send them to me on Instagram because I would love to see your reptile rooms. I love getting more inspiration for my own creations. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. I think the final thing that I have in my reptile room would have to be my guardian dog, Chacho, who literally just is always in the reptile room sunbathing because he loves the sun that comes in. He also likes looking out the window. He also stares at Banba all the time, and Banba tries to climb out on his head. It's very weird, but Banba does not care about Chacho whatsoever. I was worried that he was going to be stressed out because Chacho actually used to bark at Banba, but he doesn't bark anymore, and they're just used to each other now. So Chacho is basically just now the guardian of the reptile room. He thinks that this is his playroom and all of these animals are his. So yeah. Again, if you're going to do something like that and add a dog to your reptile room just to hang out and stuff, just always keep an eye on them. Make sure that all of your animals are safe as always. You don't want there to be any potential dangers or anyone getting harmed or stressed out. But there's a lot of just peacefulness in this room. All of the animals seem to not be stressed out. Chacho's used to all of the animals. The animals are pretty much used to him just sitting there. So it's my happy place. My reptile room is my happiest place on earth. I love spending time in here. So I'm glad that I'm able to share it with you guys and that you guys appreciate it as well. So again, yeah, if you guys have your own reptile room, please feel free to send it to me on Instagram. I'd love to see it. If you have any other tips and tricks for setting up your own reptile rooms, please leave it in a comment to help everyone else out. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Thank you guys so much for watching.